All right, let's dive right into this explainer and meticulously unpack what is widely considered the ultimate historical cold case, the complex origins of the Voynich Manuscript. We are going to explore its twisting history, look at a really wild cast of suspects, and break down the hard science behind a book that has completely defied explanation for centuries.
I mean, this 240-page tome has literally been called the Holy Grail of cryptography, and quite fittingly, the Everest of codebreaking. And for good reason, too. It has deeply frustrated brilliant scholars, linguists, and professional codebreakers. We're even talking about teams from the NSA for over a century. It's the kind of puzzle where, as one researcher perfectly noted, trying to crack it is like attempting to solve a million-piece jigsaw puzzle with your eyes totally shut.
So, to kick off our investigation, we've got to ask ourselves a fundamental question. What makes this specific manuscript so uniquely baffling compared to the thousands of other ancient texts out there? Why does this one single document stand out so vividly in the archives of history?
Well, just think about the incredibly bizarre nature of what's actually inside this thing. It is filled with hand-drawn images that look like they were pulled straight out of a fever dream. We're talking unidentifiable plants, floating castles, and women bathing in these weird tubular structures. There are intricate astrological diagrams, zodiac rings, and suns and moons with literal faces. And all of this is accompanied by a completely undeciphered looping handwriting that scholars have simply dubbed Voynichese.
The modern chapter of this mystery really begins in 1912. That's when a Polish antique book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich stumbled across the document at a Jesuit college in Italy. He was, understandably, completely puzzled by what he found. He purchased it from a cash-strapped priest, eventually brought it over to the United States, and honestly sparked a century of intense obsession by experts trying to figure out what on earth these pages contain.
Okay, so Voynich had this bizarre book. But how did a seemingly medieval manuscript end up at an Italian Jesuit college in the early 20th century to begin with? It is time to follow the historical paper trail and trace the ownership backward.
If we build that historical paper trail backwards from Voynich, we actually find a letter tucked right into the cover, dated around 1665. It was from a scholar named Joannes Marcus Marci, who sent the book to a famous Jesuit polymath named Athanasius Kircher in Rome. And that letter made a huge claim. It said the book had once been bought by Emperor Rudolf II of Bohemia in the early 1600s.
Now, the craziest part of that letter is the price tag. It states that Emperor Rudolf actually paid an astonishing 600 ducats for this bewildering book. To put that into perspective, that is the equivalent of over 2 kilograms of solid gold. Clearly, whoever sold it to him managed to convince the emperor that it contains incredibly valuable hidden knowledge, maybe something related to alchemy, botany, or medicine.
With a lucrative payout of 600 ducats, you know we have to look at the usual suspects. Let's interrogate the roster of proposed authors who might have created this absolute masterpiece of confusion, either as a genuine work of hidden science or, potentially, as a really elaborate con.
This suspect list is all over the place. That 1665 letter speculated the author was the famous 13th century polymath Roger Bacon. Other people have pointed to the 16th century Elizabethan mystic John Dee, or his associate, the alchemist Edward Kelly, who definitely had a habit of making outlandish claims. Some suggest the 15th century Italian architect Antonio Averlino. And of course, you've got your fringe theories involving covens of Italian witches, or even, get this, Martians. Some folks even suspected Wilfrid Voynich fabricated the whole thing himself.
Now, you might be thinking, didn't Voynich just forge the book himself to make a quick buck? Well, we can completely debunk that popular theory. While he for sure had the motive, finding a lost Roger Bacon book would have made him a fortune, the forensic truth prevailed. In 1999, the discovery of a historical letter from a man named Barish to Kircher from the 1630s confirmed the manuscript existed way before Voynich was even born. So, to rule out our older suspects, like the 13th century friar Roger Bacon or those 16th century alchemists, we need to bring in the heavy hitter. We need an objective forensic interrogation. We have to let modern science step in and shatter those early myths.
Back in 2009, researchers at the University of Arizona took 4 tiny samples of the vellum parchment and ran carbon-14 dating on them. The results were absolutely conclusive. The parchment was created between 1404 and 1438. This instantly shatters the Roger Bacon theory because he died in the 13th century, over 100 years before the animal used for this parchment was even born.
And this step-by-step scientific interrogation reveals even more hard facts.
Following the C14 dating, the University of York used amino acid sequencing to prove the parchment is standard European calfskin, not goatskin. Then, Macron Associates confirmed the paints and the medieval iron gall ink are entirely consistent with early 15th century European materials. So we can absolutely rule out a 16th century John Dee or Edward Kelly hoax, too. The physical materials are undeniably from the early 1400s.
Plus, we have a massive visual clue. Hidden within a section called the Rosette Foldout is a drawing of a castle featuring very distinct gibelline swallowtail battlements. While debated by some, many art analysts and researchers argue this specific architectural detail points our detective work heavily toward northern Italy during the Italian Renaissance, since those structures were highly characteristic of that specific region.
All right, having established the physical origins of the book, early 15th century Europe, quite possibly northern Italy, we finally arrive at our linguistic cold case. The physical book is real, the ink is real, but what about the origin of the text itself?
This is where it gets super interesting. Statistical analysis reveals that the word entropy of the manuscript is roughly 10 bits per word. Now, why does that matter to us? Because it shockingly mirrors the mathematical rhythm and structure of natural languages, like English and Latin. Researchers have noted it is highly compatible with natural languages and entirely incompatible with random-generated text. It is not just random scribbles, there is a very distinct underlying structure at play here.
Because of that structure, scholars are basically tearing their hair out debating three massive linguistic theories today. The first is that it's a cipher, a complex secret code designed to hide a natural European language. The second is that it's an unrecorded natural language, maybe a Proto-Romance, Sino-Tibetan, or even an Aztec language like Nahuatl, just written phonetically in an invented alphabet. And the third is that it's a highly sophisticated hoax or glossolalia, meaningless, albeit highly structured gibberish, perhaps crafted specifically to swindle a wealthy, gullible buyer like Emperor Rudolph out of his gold.
Oh, and just to add yet another wild twist to this linguistic puzzle, researchers have actually observed distinct handwriting differences in the manuscript, known as Courier A and B. This implies that the text was penned by two or more scribes working together with the painting done by yet another party. And intriguingly, these two handwriting styles correspond to two slightly different languages or dialects within the text itself. It wasn't just one mad genius, it was a collaborative effort.
So, after stripping away all the myths and laying out the hard forensic facts, we have a 15th century calfskin manuscript, likely from Europe, filled with structured but unreadable text written collaboratively by multiple people. We have to ask ourselves, will this 15th century masterpiece ever actually surrender its final secrets? Is there a lost language or a brilliant medical text waiting to be decoded, or did the authors take their secrets to the grave, leaving the joke forever on us? What do you think? It's a fascinating mystery that leaves us all wanting to know just a little bit more.